the first thing we're going to do is just go through quickly the basic hand setup that we've got here, and then we'll get into adding the first layer of controls. So first things first, as my scene is currently set up, I have got my fingers. They're currently not attached to the rig itself. So if your fingers are currently parented to the slave wrist, it's probably a good idea to temporarily disconnect them. So just select your main finger joints, hit Shift P to unparent them, and obviously they will be connected again at the end, but similar to the theme of the other videos, I want to create this hand system independently so that I can just take the final system when it's all said and done and connect it to the main rig. So these have already been oriented. I've got them oriented so that, as you can see, Y is my primary axis, and the positive rotation bends the fingers downwards. And for the thumb, because of the opposing nature of the thumb, positive Y will bend that inwards. So I've taken care of that with my joint orientation ahead of time. So all that's pretty much already done. The other thing I did was I made sure that my fingers lined up with the hand mesh. The hand mesh itself has not been skinned yet, as you can see, but it is lined up so that I can skin it very quickly and easily when it's time. I mean, to be honest with you, I could do it now. I have detached the hand just to keep it simple for now and give me the ability to do a test skin on the hand all by itself. If you don't want to detach the hand and just want to save the skinning till the very, very end and skin the entire body at once, then you can do that. I just did it for the sake of this example. Okay, so with that understood as far as the starting point that I've got here, so I've got, again, oriented joints lined up to my geometry and not currently attached to the rest of the rig. Other than that, it's a basic setup. Each finger has 4 joints total. The end joint, and then I've got them labeled essentially index 1 and index. So index 1, index 2, middle 1, middle 2, ring 1, ring 2, pinky 1, pinky 2, and obviously thumb 1, thumb 2. So there's a consistency there in the naming, and obviously the others are all end. And yeah, that's pretty much ready to go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just quickly go through adding a basic FK system to one of these fingers. Now, I'm not going to go through in the tutorial adding that for each of the fingers, because it's, once you know how to do it once, it's just rinse and repeat. You're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm going to set up the index finger, and then I'll pause the video, set up the others, and come back with the entire hand set up. So in order to do this, I'm going to have to create a control of some sort, and I'm just going to create a basic curve shape that allows me to just draw a shape down to each knuckle joint, and just have something that represents each knuckle that's easy to select and easy to see through the geometry. So much like I did in the others, just going to switch to the top view here. I'm going to create this at the center of the grid. Main reason is because I know I'm going to use the Curve Tools EP Curve Tool, which allows me to do straight lines easily. I'm going to go into the settings, just like I did in the previous examples. I'm going to make sure it's set up to linear mode, which allows me to do straight lines. Just again, allows me to create nice simple shapes. Other than that, I'm going to leave it at the default. So again, make sure it's in linear mode for straight lines only. And then with that done, I am going to hold down the X key, which is grid snap, and I'm going to literally draw the first point at the center of the grid. I'm going to go a few grid spaces up, and then I'm going to create kind of a diamond shape on top of it, I guess. Not necessarily a diamond, but a diamondish. So we've got this kind of shape here. So I literally just made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clicks of the mouse, hit enter, and what I'm left with is this. And I created the center of the grid this way because I knew when I hit enter, by default, Maya would create the center of the object at the center of the grid. So I've got a nice clean pivot point at the base of the object, which is what I want. So now that I've got that created, I'm going to snap that to the actual position of the finger. There's a few ways I can do it. I'm actually going to use the same method that I used for the again, the FK controllers in the previous videos. So from here, I'm going to parent it to the knuckle joint for the index. So the left index joint, shift, or not shift P, P to parent. And then if you recall, because I've given this a new parent, the as soon as you parent an object to a new object, it displays the offset or the difference in location up here in the translations, because it's always offset from wherever it was wherever it's currently parented. So if I zero that out, oh, I did it in the wrong order. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to parent the controller to the finger. So I got my selection order wrong before, so be very careful with that. So my left control, index control, shift click the finger, parent it in the correct direction. And now when I select, I should have noticed when the rotation wasn't different that I did it in backwards. So you can see now I've centered it on the knuckle. Now there is a offset difference. I want this facing up. So all I'm going to do now, let's just figure out, I need to rotate it 180 degrees in Y and 90 degrees in Z. And there is my controller. Now I may need to resize this. I think it's a bit too big right now, so I'm going to scale that down a little bit. But that should be fine. I'm going to just go into control verts. I'm going to scale this down to make it a bit smaller as well, so they don't overlap each other on the next finger. But yeah, that should work fine. So now what I'm going to do is, with this attached to the finger, I'm going to freeze transformations. And that will set this current location as essentially home base in relationship to this parent. And I'm going to unparent it again. And if you recall, that process will give us a good starting point for doing our parent to shape node procedure. So I'm going to do that next. I'm going to parent the controller to the finger, or the controller's, I'm going to parent the controller to the finger's shape node. That's what it boils down to. So like exactly the same process as we used in the head, neck, and again the FK arms. So if you recall, to do that, I'm going to select the controller, hit the down arrow to make sure I've got its shape node selected. Go down to the mill, type in parent-r-s. Oh, don't forget to select the joint. And also, I'm going to go to my custom tab here. Have I already got it added? Oh, I do. I've already got that added. So again, if you recall, you can add mel commands to the shelf by control, click, and dragging. So if you select the command, hold down the control key, and middle click and drag up to the shelf, you can create a copy of that on the shelf bar so you don't have to type it every time. I've already done it here in my iteration of Windows, so I'm not going to create it again. You can see if I hover over it, it says parent-r-s. So if I click on that, that will be exactly the same for me as typing it in here, so I don't have to type it every single time. And obviously, you should always test it to make sure it worked. And in this case, it actually didn't, so I think I messed up my selection. So I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to select the controller, hit the down arrow, shift click the joint, run my parent-r-s command, and test it. There we go. So now when I select this controller, it works. And the other thing you'll notice is that I kind of skipped labeling this curve. That's because I know when I use this method of parenting, the controller is going to inherit the name of the joint. So you can see it's already labeled. And that's because they're both sharing the same transform node, which was already labeled. We already created that name, or I already created that name when I labeled the joints in the first place. So it actually is redundant to label your controllers. It's not really necessary. Okay, so that's one down. Now, one thing I just realized that I should have done, rather than create this thing over and over again, I should have just duplicated it. And now that it's connected, it's actually difficult to do that. So I'm actually going to take a step back, quickly undo that, make sure I don't go back too far. There we go. So yeah, before I go on to the next stage, I'm actually going to duplicate this twice. So I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate. I'm going to snap the duplicate to this joint. And I'm going to hit Control D again to duplicate and snap it to this joint so that I've got it. Just going to hide this geometry temporarily. Control H. So now I've got one of these for every finger, and just to have it at the ready, I'm going to duplicate it one more time, Control D. I'm going to move it off to the side, so I'll use that as my master later when I duplicate the rest of the fingers. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do my parent alignment to each of these joints, and then I'll just parent them all at the same time. So I'll do this one next. I will parent it to its finger. Freeze transformations. I would zero it out if it had any values, but you can see it doesn't. So I'm just going to go modify freeze transformations. And then for this one, I'll do the same thing. Parent. Looks like it's the same. Modify freeze transformations just to be safe. And now I'm going to select all three of them, unparent them, and now I'm ready to do each of them one at a time and parent them using the parent-r-s. So I'll start with this one, select it, hit the down arrow, making sure the shape is selected. Once you're confident that it is, select the joint, hit our parent button, test it. Oh, this one is moving because it's also parented to the finger still, so I'm going to unparent that so it's all by itself. It's no longer attached. There we go. So now I just do the same thing for this next one. Select it, hit the down arrow, make sure the shape node is selected, which it is. Then control click the finger, joint, and then run the parent command and test. Always test each of them just to make sure you did what you thought you did. That one looks good. One last one. Hit the down arrow, Make sure the shape is selected. Select the last finger joint, index finger joint, and run the parent-r-s command. And that is literally all there is to it. So I'll do the thumb, and then I'll, just as a refresher, and then I'll just jump ahead with the other fingers complete, because, again, they're all identical. So I'm going to go back to my master that I created. I'm going to duplicate it 1, 2, 3 times. So Control-D, Control-D, Control-D. And now I'm going to snap each one of them to a finger or to a thumb joint. So they're all aligned. Now, one at a time, I will parent them to the joint that they will eventually have control over. Just using the P key. I will zero out the values. I will freeze transformations. And I will immediately unparent it. And you can see that gets it aligned and oriented to the same as the joints in the thumb itself, so that they'll bend the correct way when I select them. Just making sure the controller matches the orientations of the joints, which is really important. So I'll do the same thing for this one. I will select the controller first, shift click the joint, hit P, zero out any of the translate and rotation values. That will match the orientation, which is exactly what we want. Shift P to unparent. Move on to the next one. Once again, select the object, parent it to the joint, zero out any values for translate and rotation, freeze the transformations in this new location, immediately unparent. So now that they've all been essentially oriented and cleaned up properly by that parent, zero, and freeze trick, now I know that they're all perfectly set up to get the correct results when I parent-s-r. So one last time, grab the first one, hit the down arrow, confirm that you've got the shape node. You may have noticed in the video before I select the joint, my gizmo disappears. That's the Q key. If you don't already know that, memorize it. It's a handy one. If you hit the Q key, that will essentially take you into just selection mode. And in selection mode, you don't see the gizmo. I find the gizmo gets in the way sometimes when I'm trying to select something else, so I just hit the Q key. So I've got a clean slate here, and I'm not going to accidentally click on the gizmo and move anything. So that's all I'm doing there. Test it. Perfect. So once again, select your controller, hit the down arrow, which selects the shape node, hit the Q key to hide the gizmo, grab the joint you want to control, run your parent-s-r command. Down, select, parent. So now, if I select all of these controllers with the shift key and rotate them all in Y at the same time, you can see they all rotate in the directions they should, and I've got these nice, easy selection handles to work with. And if I unhide the hand, you just want to make sure that your selectors are selectable outside of the geometry, which they are. So that's exactly what I want here. So I'm going to pause the video here and go ahead and complete the other 3 fingers, and we'll be right back. All right, back again. So all the other fingers have been set up exactly the same way, and I've got them all selected right now, all of the controllers. And you can see, if I rotate them all in Y, essentially I create a fist, more or less, and I can also rotate in negative to kind of over-flex the fingers in the other direction and spread them that way. But now I have the ability to control these joints without actually having to select the joints, which is always what you're aiming for when it comes to creating up custom controllers. So I'm going to zero that out. So that is pretty much it. I mean, hypothetically, if you just wanted to create basic FK finger controls, this is all you have to do. However, we want to go a little bit more in depth than this, and we want to create a multi-layered setup where I have the ability to both predefine some poses, but still give the animator the ability to set offset keyframes to be able to tweak the pose as needed. So that's what we're going to go and do in the next video. We'll add our second layer of control.